UN human rights monitors say they've found proof that both Russia and Ukraine have committed abuses against civilians and prisoners of war, though Moscow has committed most of the violations.
Unfortunately, we found that there have been significant violations on both sides, summary executions, torture, and so on.
In its latest report on the conflict, the UN monitoring mission in Ukraine says since the invasion began, it's documented more than 600 cases of enforced disappearances and arbitrary detention of civilians committed by the Kremlin's forces, and 91 cases by Kyiv's forces. In relation to the treatment of prisoners of war, the report reads, many of the documented violations amount to gross violations of international human rights law, as well as to serious violations of international humanitarian law, and thus may constitute war crimes.
We hope that it will lead to criminal accountability, but also, very importantly, that it helps to prevent future atrocities from taking place. Unfortunately, we've seen so many atrocities during this war. We don't want to see any more.
Ukraine's foreign ministry, reacting to the findings, said in a statement the country considers it unacceptable to place responsibility on the victim of aggression, adding Ukraine has the right to self-defense. The Ukrainian military says in the past 24 hours, Russia has launched dozens of missile and rocket attacks across Ukraine. Meantime, a separate report from the United Nations nuclear watchdog warns that the situation is still precarious at Europe's largest nuclear power plant under Russian military occupation. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency will visit Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant next week to assess firsthand the security situation there. The security dangers, he says, are all too obvious, as is the necessity to act now to prevent an accident with potentially detrimental consequences. And one more development to tell you about. Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country will station tactical nuclear weapons in neighboring Belarus without, he insists, violating its international obligations. Now, this will mark the first time since the mid-1990s that Moscow has had such weapons outside the country. For City News, I'm Caryn Ceolin.